Good morning, everyone. For those of you who are new with us or are visiting this week, I just want to let you know who is standing up before you. I'm Jason Toy. I'm the youth minister here at Sugar Grove, and across from me is Kathy Cameron. She's our children's minister. And so you guys get the honor and privilege to hear us speak this morning. Okay, I got a couple more laughs than I did for first service, so that's good. First service, there was like complete silence, and I was like,
Crickets.
Tough crowd, all right, here we go. So I appreciate those who laugh at my jokes. So this morning what we're going to be doing is Kathy's going to kind of give us an illustration of kind of what we're going to be talking about the rest of this morning. So, Kathy, take it away.
We're going to start with my helper. I need my helper to come up. Alex Rathjen
Yeah, let's give it up for Alex.
has volunteered graciously to be my helper. Alex and I are going to tell a little Bible story that's probably familiar to everybody in the room, but we're going to use it as an illustration. We want to talk about David and Goliath. Now, David was probably a little older than Alex is right now. How old are you, Alex? 10. David was probably a little older than Alex, but not by much. David was the youngest brother in a family of lots of brothers, and his 3 older brothers were off fighting in a war. They were fighting the Philistines. So I want you to imagine, if you will, a hill and a hill with a valley in between. And the Israelites were on one hill, and the Philistines were on the other hill. And David's father sent him from shepherding out in the fields to check on his brothers and to take them some food. So David got in his wagon full of bread and cheese and whatnot, and he went off to the battle. And when he got there, he saw something that alarmed him and quite frankly made him just a little bit angry. The Philistines had a champion who would come out every day for 40 days and challenge the Israelites. Now, the champion was 9.5 feet tall. Jason is 6'3", so the yardstick actually makes him 3 inches shorter than Goliath really was. 9.5 feet. He was a very tall guy. Do you know how much Goliath's armor weighed? 125 pounds. Now, there are probably women sitting in this room who weigh 125 pounds, but we won't ask because that's rude. But that's a lot to carry around on your back. The pointy end of his spear weighed 15 pounds. 15 pounds! He was a scary dude. And he came out every day and he said, "Send your champion out to fight me," kind of like a duel. "And if I beat him, then you'll be my slaves. And if he beats me, then you'll be our slaves." Did I say that right? It was a challenge. And David didn't like it very much because the Israelites were quivering. They were frightened. They wouldn't come out and meet the challenge. And David felt like God was with them and they should step out and defeat Goliath. But the Israelites wouldn't do it. They were afraid. So David said, "Well, what's wrong with you people? How come nobody's gone? What happens to the guy? What does he get if he beats Goliath?" So they told him, and David said, "Well, let's just go do that." Well, here's my favorite part of the story, actually. It's the little sibling rivalry piece, where David's older brother Eliab said, "What are you talking about? You're so conceited. Go back to the sheep. You're not going to do anything. You're a little boy." And David said, like all little brothers everywhere, "What did I do? I can't even speak." And Saul heard about what was going on and called for David. So David went, and Saul said, "Well, okay, if you want to fight Goliath, fight Goliath. I'm going to fix you up." Okay, so I'm going to fix you up. Are you ready? Saul got his armor. He said, "You're going to need a hat. You're going to need a sword. You're going to need a shield. And you're going to need, this armor that gives you a fake six-pack. So here you go." He fixed him up. He put his armor on him and his hat and his sword. There you go. And you know what David said? "I can't do this." Can you say that? "I can't do this."
I can't do it.
He can't do it. It's not his armor. It's not what he's used to. It's not what he can do. He just needs God. He needs God and a smooth stone. And that's what he took. All right, so David took the armor off, and he did it his own way. Thank you very much, Alex. You may take your seat. Now, I want to say one last thing before we move on, a little tidbit here that you may not know. When I was younger, I always wondered why 5 stones. A real man of faith would have picked up 1 because there was only 1 Goliath, right? So why 5? Well, 2 other places in the Bible talks about, in 2 Samuel and in 1 Chronicles, it talks about brothers of Goliath being killed by Israelite soldiers. So we know that Goliath had at least 2 brothers. He probably had more. And I think David might have been worried about those brothers coming after him out of revenge. And so he picked up enough stones to kill all of Goliath's brothers. And that is real faith.
Fun facts with Kathy right there. So usually when we hear the story of David and Goliath, we usually focus on the battle scene, right? David, this young man who faces this giant and goes after him with a sling and a stone, right, and takes him out, which that's incredible, and it takes an incredible amount of faith. And when you read the story, you see how almost arrogant David is in his faith, which is kind of cool. I mean, he's like, I've taken down lions and bears. God's given me then. Why can't I take down Goliath? And you're like, well, Goliath's 9'6". That's why you can't take him down. He's not a bear or a lion. But he's all in. He knew, like, oh, it's easy. God's got our back. We're the chosen people, right? We got this. And so once David starts telling his peers that, and Saul hears about it, Saul brings him in. That's the part of the story we're going to focus on, is the exchange between Saul and David. So David walks in, probably 12 to 16, maybe about the same size, and he's probably like, I don't know if we can put our hopes and dreams of the entire Israelite nation to this kid, right? But then hearing David kind of talk about his faith and why he's going to be able to do this, Saul kind of was like, okay, you can do it. You got this. But then has that moment of doubt again, that human side of him comes back out and says, but let me help you. I know how. Wear my armor. Get my sword. Get my shield. All that stuff. He gives them the things that fit Saul. And for those of you that don't know, Saul was huge too. Saul wasn't like a little guy. He stood a head taller than everybody in his tribe, which is why he was elected king, because he was like this presence, right? He was just big, and everybody kind of looked up to him, literally. And so he's giving his big armor on David too. And so it's kind of a good illustration to see how that armor kind of looked clunky on him, right? That's probably what it was like for David. And what I want to kind of talk about on this is, far too often we as adults do this to our children and our teens. We want to put our armor on them, put our faith on them, instead of allowing them to develop their own faith. And I think a lot of times we give them how we think we should worship God, or what our faith is, or how we think you should approach God, instead of letting them find their way and really see what being a true believer of God is, right? And now, listen to me when I say this. I'm not discouraging. We should teach our kids about the Bible. We should teach them about God. We should teach them about the commandments and all that. But I think far too often we put our own fears and our own doubts and our own limitations of what God can do on our kids. And that's where we kind of want to talk about this morning, is how to prevent ourselves from doing that. Because as Mark has been talking about the last several weeks, and I'm sure you guys have seen studies and statistics that have said, the younger generation, around my age, they're not coming back to church. And I think so often it's because we have given them our armor and said, go. And that's not going to last, because once they face the first hard thing and it doesn't fit right anymore, they're just going to throw it off and be like, I'm done with it. I can't do it anymore. So we need to be aware of that and know, how do we build them to where they are getting their own armor instead of our armor? We're just giving it to them. And so that's what we're going to kind of do and talk about this morning. So how do we help our children find our armor? Well, as me and Kathy kind of brainstormed over the last 2 weeks, we came up with 4 practical applications that we can implement in our lives to really strengthen our faith and to strengthen our kids and our teens' faith. So that's what we're going to kind of go over coming up. So the first one is, we have to make church and God a priority. We have to make our faith a priority in our lives. And I put a couple of verses on there. We're not going to read them all for time's sake, but the Joshua one basically says, for all those who are in my house, we're going to believe in God. He said, this is how our family is going to run this. We're going to trust in God. We're going to believe in God. If you're with us, great. If not, we'll see you later. He made that a priority in his family's life. Now, the thing is, this is where it gets tough, because life gets busy, right? There's times where we have 30 things pulling us in different directions, and so sometimes we let church or our faith kind of go to the second or third or maybe even fourth tier in our life, because we're like, well, I need to make sure this happens and this happens and this happens. And where it's all good that we want to get things accomplished, and because we are living here, you got to remember, we're showing our teens and our children what's important to us. And so that may mean cutting out that extra sport. Maybe you limit your kids to 2 sports instead of the 3 this year. It may mean not letting your child or teen go to their friend's birthday party that weekend because that's the weekend of the retreat, and you really want to make that a priority for them to be there for that. Or maybe it's cutting out that extra club at school that they're in, even though it may look really good on the college application. Maybe it would take away the time they can spend with their community of believers, and not just saying get them to church because that's the most important thing, but have them be around people who believe in God because that's the important thing. And Kathy's going to give a little story of kind of how to illustrate this from a parent's perspective, because as you all know, I am not that yet.
So someone once said, don't waste your breath proclaiming what's really important to you, because how you spend your time says it all. And it won't surprise you to sit here and hear us say, the children's minister and the youth minister, that you should bring your kids to church. But we're saying it anyway. You should bring your kids to church. I always scratch my head a little bit when parents say, but they don't have any friends at church. Well, they won't have friends if you don't bring them. That's how they make friends, is they come. So you want to bring your kids to the activities and bring your kids to church. You want to make church a priority. I want to say to you that are parents out there, you don't always let your kid choose. Sometimes they're not going to choose what's best for them. So sometimes you have to be the one to step up and say, this is the way it's going to be. And I'm sorry that you're mad, but that's just the way it is. I have 4 children. My husband and I have been married 36 years this August, and we have 4 children, ages 21 and a half to 27. 50% of my kids are joiners. Life is a party, and if 2 people are together, they're going to go be with them because they want to join in the fun. But 2 of them are not joiners, and my oldest in particular really struggled with leaving home and being away from us, and he didn't like it. The summer before he went into 7th grade, we sent him to church camp, and he hated it. He called us every day asking us to come and pick him up. Every day. I think on Wednesday I said to my husband, quit answering the phone, because Jeff wanted to go get him. And I was adamantly opposed to going and getting him. He was going to stick it out. He was in a safe place. It would be fine. And when we got there on Saturday to pick him up, the nurses came and met us and told us that we owed them a bottle of Tums because he'd spent most of the week in their cabin eating Tums. He was fine. In the fall, it came time to go to the youth retreat. He didn't want to do that either. He didn't want to go, and we decided it was the best thing for him, and it was very traumatic, packing his bag, dragging him out of the house. I had someone come in to pick him up. I opened the door. I threw in the bag. I pushed in the kid. I closed the door, and he drove off. Quit laughing, Ryan, because that's not nice. It's my other son, who is a joiner. He didn't have problems going. Adam had problems. A couple of years ago, I said to Adam, so, did I do the wrong thing? Did I totally traumatize you for life and make you, are you going to end up on Oprah talking about this? And you know what he said to me? He said, no, you did the right thing. You showed me that I could. You told me what was important. You made me do something that was outside my comfort zone, and it was good for me. And I didn't like it at the time, and I didn't like you very much at the time, but it was the right thing to do. So parents, I just want to say to you, be the parent that your kid needs you to be. Sometimes that's not fun, but that's what you need. You need to be the parent.
So the next thing we'll kind of be going over is be intentional about how you live your life. So basically your deeds, the things you do. And I have up there 2 verses, one in Matthew 5 where Jesus talks about being salt and light for the world. And the other one is in James, which is my favorite book, probably my favorite chapter too. But in that specific verse, basically the summary is, you show me your faith without works, and I'll show you my faith by my works. So that's something that we need to be aware of, is what we're doing outside of these 4 walls. Coming to church is very important, yes, but if that's all we do, that's not going to cut it. Because one of the things that this generation, these teens, are really good at finding is when people are being fake, or they're not genuine, right? They can see that from a mile away, and they know it, and they don't want any part of it. And so if they hear you say, oh, I love God, I love people, but then the only way you live that out is by coming to this church building once a week, maybe twice a week. You don't do anything else outside of that. That faith kind of seems boring to me. I mean, I don't want to just come to a building and sit there for an hour and a half, and then that's all it does. That's the impact it has in my life. I sat for an hour and a half and listened to some people talk. I mean, surely you don't just want to come and hear me talk every once in a while. That would be boring. And so we have to learn how to get outside ourselves and show them that this faith means something, that we want to live it out by our actions, by the things we're doing. So that's the way we love people, right? That's the way we serve people. And so it may be going out of your way to help a person in need, or maybe going on that mission trip, or doing something outside of yourself, or really having your own quiet time, have them see you having a time with God. Because then they'll know not only is that important, but it's something that shows that your faith is real outside of these buildings. And so Kathy's got some more things she wants to share with you all.
So church is great. Community is great. We just gave you a please bring them to church. But here's a fact. If you only bring them to Sunday morning worship and Bible class, that's 104 hours a year if you never miss. 104 hours in a year. So it only stands to reason that what you do at home, what they see you do at home, is more important than anything else. You are creating disciples. You are. Parents are creating disciples. The question is, disciples of what? What do they value? What are you modeling? What's important to you? Learning is more caught than taught. What you do is so much more important than what you say. So do your kids see you read the Bible? Do your kids see you pray other than meal times? Are you taking care of the environment? Are you taking care of others? Are you reaching out to the poor and serving? And all of that is very important. Your model is very important. I have two little things to say about this modeling thing, and it just occurred to me at first service while I was getting ready to say it that my mother was going to be at second service, and this might be a little embarrassing. So I apologize in advance to my mom, who does make her bed. But I'm not a bed maker. I don't make my bed. If you come and visit me at my house, my bed will be made. In fact, about a week ago, I was making the bed, and Jeff said, "Is somebody coming over?" Because that's when I make my bed. Normally, I'm not a bed maker, and the consequence of that is I have raised 4 children who never make their bed. They don't do it. I didn't model it. It wasn't important. I didn't talk about it. They don't make their bed. I'm okay with that. I am. But they do what I do. The other one is also not terribly flattering. I'm not a morning person. My family knew really early on not to talk to me until about, 10 o'clock, 10:30. I'm just not a morning person. When Jeff wakes up and he says good morning, my frequent response is, yeah, what's good about it? Because generally, it's just not a good morning. So I had birthed all of these really lovely, happy babies who about 2 or 3 turned into grumpy people in the morning because that's what they saw. So now none of us, and I should apologize to their future spouses, none of us are really morning people too much because that's what they saw. That's what was modeled for them.
And so building off of that, the next one we're going to talk about is being intentional about our conversations we're having. So it goes more than just our actions. Their words are important too. And what we kind of want to stress here is how many of you, if you've had kids or have kids currently, drive your kids someplace once or twice a week? Right? Oh, some of y'all don't drive your kids places or haven't? I mean, come on. So if you have a kid, you're probably acting as a chauffeur sometimes, right? And the thing is, usually, let's say throughout the week you have 30 minutes in the car where it's just you and your kid or you and your teen, right? What do you usually do on that 30 minutes? Usually, maybe you turn on the radio, you go to a station, maybe you turn it to some kids' music if you have a younger kid. What about if we use those times to speak about our faith, to talk about God? We have those times anyway, so why not be intentional about it? Maybe it's asking your teen or your kid or even your grown adult kid saying, hey, how did you see God work in your life today? Or what did you see God do today? Or maybe it's, hey, flip open to Psalms, pick a Psalm and read it. Right? If we use those times we have in life that are going to happen regardless, if we use those to be intentional about speaking about our faith, it becomes much more natural, and it shows, again, that it's important. It's something that needs to be on their mind. And so I think that's one way we can show that this is important to me. We're going to speak about it. And it probably might be a little bit awkward from time to time. That's okay. When you kind of get into the flow, most of the time, at least from the teens' perspective, they'll kind of go with the flow once it starts happening. They'll be really weirded out about it at first, like, why are we doing this? This is dumb. But just stick with it. And if you even are honest with it, I don't want to step too much on what Kathy's going to say, so I'll let her kind of go from there. But don't be afraid to be a little bit uncomfortable at first if it's something you want to try to do. But use your time wisely in those moments. And so, Kathy?
And I would say, be confessional about it. Say to your kids, even your grown kids, if you've got grown kids, say to them, I'm sorry, we should have done this earlier, but I want to talk about where God is in my day. Where is God in your day? And don't just ask the questions, but share. They need to hear you say, where did I see God today? And this is where God showed up in my life today. We learned in our house a while back to quit talking about coincidences and luck and, isn't that a happenstance? To us, that's God working. Well, it's not coincidental. God is working in our life, and we give credit to God, and we talk about that. We used to say to our kids when they left the house, remember whose kid you are. And they knew that we did not mean you're Jeff and Kathy Cameron's kid. They knew that we meant you're God's kid. And that should inform the way you live your life. That should mean something. So remember whose kid you are. We're all growing together in faith. Is there anybody here who's finished their faith journey? Who's like at the end of it, you're done? No, because we're all growing together. And we want to continue that. We want to grow with our kids, no matter how old they are. We want to talk about our faith journey together. I want to say just a word about those of you who have teenagers in this room. If you think that the world is the same as it was when you were a teenager, you're wrong. The world is very different for our kids. How many of you heard about the Boston bombing 5 minutes after it happened? I know I did. Within 5 minutes, I knew what had happened. That's the world our kids live in. It's immediate. They know everything there is to know nearly. It's all out there. The people that they know are different. My daughter, for her 14th or 15th birthday, I don't remember which, wanted to have a fondue party with her girlfriends. She invited 7 girlfriends, so there were 8 girls total, and they were all sitting around my dining room table enjoying fondue. And at some point, I looked at that table, and I realized there were 2 Muslims, there was a Buddhist, there was an atheist, there was a Mormon, there was an Orthodox Christian, a Zoroastrian, and my daughter. Those were her friends. If you're not talking about the world we live in with your children, you're missing an opportunity to really talk about your own faith and what's important to you as a family. I urge you to talk to your kids.
And the last one we're going to talk about, which is probably the most important one, it's simply invest in the kids and the teens. Now, this one I think goes for everyone. It can be a parent investing in your kids and your kids' friends, grandparents investing in your grandkids and their friends, but also those of you that don't have kids. You can also invest in the kids and in the teens. If we want to make faithful disciples, faithful believers in God, then we need to invest in them now so that when they do go off on their own, they too want to build faithful disciples and followers. And I think all it is it could be something really big or something really small, as long as you're putting some sort of investment in it and trying to really make an impact and a difference in their lives. It'll add up over time. And maybe some of the things you do is you come up to Kathy and I and say, hey, is there any teens or kids that need scholarships for this upcoming camp? It can maybe be something like that, where it's like, yeah, we need 3 kids, this is how much it is, and maybe you write a $100 check for us, like, okay, this will help sponsor one of them. Something like that. That's an investment. Maybe it can be something like the youth barbecue that's happening today. Maybe you're like, well, I want the youth ministry to have a great summer. I want them to be able to not have to charge teens for extra stuff. So maybe that's the investment you make. It also could be maybe you volunteer to be a driver to some of our events. There's times when we do things that are outside of this building and we need extra hands to be able to drive and transport our kids and our teens to the things. So maybe that's where you step in and say, I think I can do that. I got a car that can hold 4 or 5. I'll volunteer, I'll do that. That's an investment because you're showing them that they're important, that you want to be there for them. Another one, it might be something a little bigger where you go on a camp or a retreat with us. You spend 3 days, you spend a week investing in these kids, investing in these teens, and showing them what a godly man or woman looks like. Maybe that's the investment you make. Or maybe it's teaching a Sunday morning class or a Wednesday night class. Maybe you're saying, I'll give 4 months, I'll give 6 months of investment into these teens and into these children. The thing is, like I said, is it can be a huge investment of your time. It can be a huge investment of your money. Just make some sort of investment, one or the other. Hopefully you give a little bit of both, but hopefully it's at least one of those. Just make sure you see them as a priority. Another thing I have up there is adopt a child or a teen for lunch every month. That's something that could be huge. If some of y'all out there said, you know a family that has some kids, and you're like, let me take so-and-so to lunch once a month, and you just talk about life with them. Show them that you care, you're invested in them. That can make a world of difference right there. And the key is not to see them as just another child that you're trying to teach all that's right, but instead see them as a peer too. Listen to them, hear them, talk with them, share your own faith and your own struggles with them when it's appropriate. But the key is just being present with them. That'll make them see faith more than just bringing them to church and talking about it all the time. So don't be afraid to invest in them right now.
Because children aren't the church of the future. They're the church of now. God doesn't have grandchildren. God has children. He has young children and he has older children. And I think as kind of more established, further down the faith journey Christians, we really need to embrace the younger people. We really need to embrace their families, the families that are raising young people. And I'm speaking out here now to our older members who have raised their families. Invite a young family over and get to know them. Invest in the moms and dads. Give them the benefit of your wisdom. That's biblical, the older teaching the younger. So I ask you to really just reach out and embrace our younger families. When I have parents who teach in a Bible class, I almost always hear, "I'm so glad I did that. I learned so much, and my child was so happy to have me." When I frequently have college students who will come back and say, I had to go find a church because I was used to volunteering with children's ministry and I wanted to do that again. I've had college students come back and say that to me. So volunteering is a great idea. Investing in our youth there's all benefit and there's very little drawback except for the time you must give. We've all heard the statistics about our young people leaving the church. And the statistics bear out, and the ones I have spoken to say the same thing. It's organized religion they're leery of. They don't have any faith in organized religion. What brings them are relationships. All 4 of my children have relationships with adults at this church that they knew growing up, who invested in them. And I think that's what brings them back. That's what brings back our young people, is relationships. And it's not about the singing. It's not about church. It's really about church. It's about all of us. And so let's invest in our young people, and that will bring them back. That will help them develop a faith.
So the challenge is then for us is let's be a church that truly desires that. Let's be a church that challenges our teens and our children to find their own armor instead of just giving them our faith and sending them on their way. Let's encourage them on their journey and challenge them and live out some of these 4 principles we talked about. And the cool thing is this morning as we do our baby dedication, we'll get a chance to kind of make that pledge to say, yes, we're in it together. And this is your chance to say to the young families that are going to come up here to say, I'm in it with you, we're going to help you.